All right. I feel really tall now. Okay. I can still hear you up there, Marv. It's on up there. You can hear? Okay, good. Joe can hear. Ready to start? Open your Bibles this evening to 1 Samuel chapter 14. I'm very, very grateful that Brother Mosier taught the class last week in my absence. And I think he told me that he moved into chapter 14, but I'm not sure exactly. And he went all through 14? Okay. So we'll be going into chapter 15 tonight. And we're considering King David and his relationship with Absalom. Now, things have not been going well in the house of David, have they? In fact, his house is in turmoil. And so Absalom is very, very cunning. He is a deceiver. He is one who is out just for himself. And he's going to engage himself in some behavior that is not at all respectful of his father. And he will even try to take away the kingdom from his father. But tonight I want us to notice that after this incident happened with the widow of Tekoa, remember the widow of Tekoa was sent by whom to King David? By Joab, all right? Now it's interesting to me that someone comes and relays what sounds like a parable, just like Nathan had done. And she says, one of my sons killed another one of my sons, and now if the son who committed the murder is taken from me, then we will not have a descendant. And so David says, I'm going to protect you. David says, I'll take care of you. Not a hair of his head will be bothered. All right? And then what is revealed? Well, King David, we're depending upon Absalom. We're depending upon him to be our king. But what if he's cut off from us and is not allowed to return to us? Then it will be just like me losing both my sons. And David then perceived what she was talking about, right? And he said, Joab sent you. All right? This is the work of Joab. Now, Joab, of course, was looking out for his own best interest. Joab is thinking in terms of his future. And so he desires that the king bring Absalom back. And why has the king not brought Absalom back? He's fearful, isn't he? He's fearful of what the people will think after this deed by Absalom in killing his brother Amnon. And Amnon, of course, had gone in unto his sister Tamar, half-sister, but a full sister to Absalom. And Absalom, after 2 years, avenged the death of Tamar, and then he fled, didn't he? He fled to Gezer. And why was that important? Because there he could find the safety of his maternal grandfather, who was the king of that particular region. Well, now, Absalom is gone to Gezer, and then Joab brings him back, doesn't he? Joab goes before the king, and he says, and the king says, basically, I know what you've done. I know you sent the woman to talk to me and to relay that story, and I get it. Go and get Absalom. Now, did David love Absalom? Oh, he loved him. In fact, you're going to find out that once Absalom is dead, you have a father who grieves over this son. And as we shall see, despite all that Absalom had done against his father, David still loved him, didn't he? He loved his son. That was his son. Now, when Absalom returns, it's interesting that he's not allowed still to go into the palace, is he? And again, David is doing all of this to protect himself. He's thinking in terms of his own popularity. He's thinking in terms of his own support. All right, Absalom can come back, but he will remain in his house, and there's no communication between Absalom and David. Now, based on for 2 years, based on what we're going to learn about Absalom and David, does Absalom have some motives, some ulterior motives of coming back? Well, he obviously does. And we're going to see that as this particular story unfolds. Absalom likes power, doesn't he? Absalom wants to be the king, and he is going to try to find a way to be the king. And so Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem. Verse 28 of 1 Samuel 14 tells us, and he saw not the king's face. Therefore Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king, but he would not come to him. So Absalom knows how to get to the king. That's fine, Marv. I'll just put it right here right now. Yeah,
it's working now. I figured out what it was.
Okay.
You want to use it?
No, I'll just use this. I'm fine. Okay, that'll be fine. Thank you. Absalom understands how to get to the king. And the way to get to the king is through Joab, his top commander. All right? Now, has anyone ever needed you to do something for him or her and you didn't want to do it? Now, you don't have to raise your hand. All right. Somebody will come and say, I need you to do something for me. And you're just like, this is going to get me in the midst of all kinds of controversy. And I just don't want to do it. This is going to, this could even harm my reputation. And this is going to take time out of my schedule. And here's what we say today. I ain't got time for that, right? I just don't have any time for that. And so Joab is wanting Absalom just to be quiet. Look, I got you back to Jerusalem. Okay? Well, he wants to go see his father. All right? And so Joab has received word that Absalom needs to talk to you about seeing his father. Or at least Absalom needs to talk to you. And he sends a second time when Joab doesn't come. And still Joab doesn't come. So old Absalom, he's cunning. He's deceptive, and he's also a little bit mean. I mean, he just doesn't care what he has to do to get some attention. And so it is that in verse 30, Absalom says to his servant, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley there. Go and set it on fire. What's he doing now? That's an attention getter, right? That's an attention getter. And so finally, how does somebody get your attention? Well, they pull some stunt. It might be just grabbing a hold of you and say, you're going to listen to me. Or it could be setting your field on fire, right? And now Joab knows, I've got to listen to him. I've got to listen to him. Look what he's done. Joab, of course, is very, very angry over this. And he comes to Absalom, comes to his, why have you done this? Why have you set my field on fire? Now he's there, right? If you'd come before, Joab, then this wouldn't have happened. But this is to get your attention. And Absalom said, Joab, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I may send thee to the king to say, wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. What's the purpose of me coming back? All right? Why am I here? So Absalom had been brought back to Jerusalem, but he hadn't seen the king's face in 2 years. And Joab doesn't seem like he wants to help him, so he sets Joab's fields on fire. And he begs the question, why am I here? What was the purpose of me coming back? I want to see my father. And so Joab says to the king, here is what Absalom desires. He wants to see you. And he came to the king. He bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Now I want to tell you this. That is sincerity on Absalom's part, not so much on David's part, not so much on Absalom's part. All right? Now, there's about to be a war between these two men and a battle royale for the throne. Absalom wants it. And what you're about to see as we open up chapter 15 is politics at its best. It is Absalom courting the voters, right? He's going to try to win this throne without firing a shot. And so in chapter 15, the text says, "It came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him." He's still the king's son, isn't he? He's still a prince there in Israel. Absalom rose up early and he stood beside the way of the gate. And what's the old saying? Early bird catches the worm, early to bed, early to rise makes one, healthy and something and wise? Wealthy, isn't it? Healthy, wealthy, and wise. Absalom must have known a little bit about that. I'm going to get up before everybody else does because I have something I want to accomplish. Now, his motives were not good, were they? But he knew what he wanted, and that is, he wanted the throne. So Absalom said he rose up early, stood beside the way of the gate, and then he called unto him the people that would come in, from outside the city, coming in to seek justice or judgment through the courts of the king. He said, "Of what city art thou?" And one man said, "Well, thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel." And Absalom said unto him, "See, thy matters are good and right, but there's no man deputy to the king to hear thee." Now, that's an attack against his father and his system, isn't it? So Absalom is there in the gate. Do people know Absalom? Yes. In the previous chapter, remember that Israel loved Absalom, if for no other reason, his appearance. I mean, he must have, he's probably had a good skin tone. He probably is one who was well built, had the muscles, good shape physically, good physique, and he has this hair that flows down his back. He'd cut it once a year, and it would weigh about 200 not pounds, 5 pounds, 200 shekels? And so whenever he cut his hair, 200 shekels after the king's weight, that's about 5 pounds. That's a lot of hair, isn't it? And so there were people who loved him when he had his head shaved. Oh, then they loved him when it was long. He was on the front of People magazine of that day, I mean, he's part of the royal family. There's Absalom. Israel's, he's the main man in Israel, okay? He had some children. Matter of fact, he named one of his daughters Tamar, after his sister. And she, the text says, was a beautiful person. You ever notice that? Really, really good-looking people, they have good-looking children too, right? And it's amazing how a person who has the good looks, and the world is the one who sets the standard, right, about good looks, that they already have an advantage on others, don't they? So Absalom's got this advantage. He no doubt is good looking. He's handsome. And he's no doubt very smooth and flattering. And so the people come to be judged. He says, too bad you can't come before me. Yeah, if I were a judge, then I could rule on these matters. And he said, but you come in here and you're right. You're in the right. But there's nobody here to take care of this business. Does that sound like a politician? Right? Oh, listen, you put me in office and I'll handle this for you. I could do a much better job. The problem here is, this is a man attacking his own father, isn't it? This is his father. This isn't just some political opponent that knows very little about. This is his father. He said, oh, if I was in a position where I could help you out. Notice, he doesn't say immediately that what he wants is to be king. He just says, if I was just in some position where I could help you. Now, Absalom said, oh, that I were made judge in the land. Just if I could just be a judge in the land. And that every man which hath any suit or cause might come to me, I would do what? I would do him justice. All right, if somebody senses inequities, if somebody's been treated wrong and he's not getting a fair hearing, is that going to sound good? Whether or not Absalom truly means this or not, it doesn't fit his character to do anything that would promote justice. But regardless, he is good playing politics, isn't he? And so here is Absalom, and he is encountering the people who come into the city. And it says, when any man came nigh to him to do obeisance, he put forth his hand, took him, and kissed him. That's good politics, isn't it? Oh, let me give you a good hug, let me kiss you, and all of that worked. It still works today, doesn't it? And people are starting to think, this is our man. The text says, he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Hey, listen, things just aren't going like they should in David's reign. And, maybe it's time for us to go ahead and let's just put Absalom on the throne. Hey, I've heard him, he's been making some strong statements lately. He's been saying some things that need to be heard. And so all along you have to ask, where's David? David oftentimes, our wonderful King David, seems so aloof at times to what is happening. I'm sure he's going about the business of state, but he doesn't understand, at least at this point, just how dangerous Absalom really is. Well, it came to pass after 4 years. Put 4 down there instead of 40. All right? What that should read is 4 years. Not 40 makes no sense. So that's something in translation that's not correct. 4 years. All right? It came to pass after 4 years. All right? I don't know if that's like after he came back, I suppose, from having been away. But he said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I vowed unto the Lord at Hebron. Now, here says something about King David. When he hears this request, he says, you go ahead and do that. King David, remember, he's right with the Lord again, isn't he? And he loves that kind of devotion. It would be like a rebellious son. It would be like a son who's not that spiritual saying to his godly father, where can I go to church when I go to such and such place? Oh, really? You want to go to church? He said, I want to go up there to Hebron, where it all started for us, and I want to make a sacrifice. Oh, son, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad that you want to do that. I have not seen that expressed in you before. And maybe David would say to those close to him, I really do think that Absalom's, he's trying to make some things right. But he misjudges, he misunderstands Absalom's intention. Absalom tells his dad, for thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I'll serve the Lord. That's good news, isn't it? To David's ears. He says to his father, if I could just get back to Jerusalem, then I want to go make a sacrifice to my God and live up to the promise that I made to him. This is a fella who has got a lot of arrogance, right? Anytime someone is willing to bring God's name into something like that he does not mean, nor is he planning to do, that's a person with a lot of arrogance, isn't it? You see, my father, I want to go to Hebron, and there I want to make an offering. I want to do something for God. No, that's not what he's wanting to do. But the king said, you go in peace. Shalom. Go in peace. So he rose and went to Hebron. But Absalom had other intentions. He sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. Now, what's Absalom been doing? He's been getting support, hasn't he? This is a conspiracy to overthrow the throne of his father. So time is going by, and over a period of time, he's getting more and more support. Okay? He's pulling support away from his father. And the text says in verse 11 that with Absalom went 200 men that were called, and they went in their simplicity. That is, these that went with him out of the city didn't know really what he was up to. They just were going with Absalom. But Absalom had somebody who had turned on his father that was now his right-hand man. What was his name? Ahithophel. Ahithophel. Ahithophel is identified as the Gilonite, David's counselor from the city of Gilo. And here's something to remember about this man. Why would Ahithophel, why would he be interested in stabbing David in the back? Why would he be guilty of committing treason against David? Well, remember that Bathsheba was the daughter of one named Eliam. Okay? Now, we read about that back when David committed the sin with Bathsheba. Her daddy's name was Eliam. Later on, at the closing chapter of 2 Samuel, you learn that Eliam's father was Ahithophel. You know, it could be there all along that Ahithophel is thinking about his granddaughter. I don't like what David did in disrupting the life of my granddaughter. But something happened here where Ahithophel turned against David. And so the text says here in verse 12, the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. It is like the snowball effect, isn't it? Or the domino effect. I mean, this thing just keeps building and it's getting out of hand. And who's the last to seem to know about it? David. David is not realizing what's happening. Now, let's go back to something we've already talked about. Isn't this still the consequences of David's action? It is, isn't it? This is all, excuse me? Yeah. Oh, he's getting probably close to 60 years old, I guess, now. Maybe. Ahithophel's the grandfather of Bathsheba. David's probably significantly older than Bathsheba, even though he had the relationship with her. But here is King David. No doubt, when all of this happens, that affair with Bathsheba is going to come back into his mind, and he's paying dearly for the consequences of his actions. Remember, when David sinned, he didn't just sin against himself or Bathsheba or against Uriah the Hittite, but against his family and against the nation and against God, didn't he? And so here we have in verse 13 a messenger coming to David and said, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. Can you just imagine how the heart of David sank when he heard that the hearts of the people are now with Absalom? Jerusalem was the city of whom? David. It's the city of David. David is the sweet singer of Israel. He's the beloved king. And this Absalom, through his cunning desire and through flattery, has turned the hearts of so many against David. And yes, that's right. And so David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, this is how serious it is, verse 14, let us flee, for we shall not escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword. So David learns about what has happened, and now what does he say? Let's get out of town. Those of you who are with me, let's leave. Now, David is trying to do what? He's trying to preserve his throne. And therefore it is best for him right now to get out of the city. That's how threatened he is. Okay? So just consider any kind of kingdom where a king or some political ruler is inside his house, but somebody in the family has has all of a sudden whipped the masses into a frenzy, and it looks like the end has come, right? So David departs. Now, the king went forth, all his household after him. The king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. That's important. All right. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off, and all his servants passed on beside him. And then I want us to notice, beginning in verse 19, there's a very special friend who's not been mentioned before who comes to the aid of David. Now, here's what I want you to think about as we get to this particular verse. What do you need when the rest of the world goes out? You need a friend, don't you? A friend. Michael Smith, I think, is the one who sang the lyrics. Maybe he wrote them as well. A friend forever if the Lord's the Lord of them. And beautiful words. Now, we're going to see that sometimes your best friends may not get a whole lot of recognition. But all of a sudden, here we have somebody who's not gotten any recognition. His name is Ittai. And when the king is heading out of town, here is Ittai the Gittite. Now, why is that important? Gittite means from Gath. Didn't David defeat somebody from Gath? Goliath was from Gath. This man used to be an enemy, but now he's a friend. You ever found out that somebody, you used to be at odds with a person, maybe didn't consider him a friend, and all of a sudden become one of your best friends? Well, Ittai is one of those kind of individuals. And so Ittai says to the king, "As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be." Is that a friend? David is at a point right now where he is so low. He's running with the people he loves for his life, hoping that somehow, some way he can preserve the throne. And here is somebody who says, "Let the whole world turn against you. I'm going to be your friend." All right? Now, here's where I start seeing David again as a type of Christ. Our Lord Jesus Christ is mocked. People scoff at Him. People abuse Him in so many different ways. And they make a mockery of His teachings. And yet He needs friends, doesn't He? He wants us to be a friend. Is He our friend? Best friend we have. Here you have David, the king, one who is is leading God's people, and from his seed the Christ would come. David needs a friend, and he's got a friend in this man Ittai. And so Ittai passed over, and his men, all the little ones that were with him. And the text says, all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. So they're running, they're fleeing, getting out of Jerusalem, going to the wilderness. Now, here are some other friends. What does he need right now? He needs some friends. Zadok and Abiathar are Levites, okay? They're from the priestly family. If the king is going out of town, they'll be right behind him carrying what? The Ark of the Covenant, right? Here they go. Now we're going to learn something else very special about the character of King David. So Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the Ark of the Covenant of God. And they set down the Ark of God, and Abiathar went up into all the people, until all the people had done passing out of the city. These are the supporters of David. And the king said unto Zadok, carry back the Ark of God into the city. He says, if I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, He will bring me again and show me both it and His habitation. What was he saying? The ark does not belong to me. Here we see the humble David. The ark does not belong to me. It belongs in Jerusalem. It belongs in the house of God, doesn't it? That's where it belongs. Have you ever heard our former presidents, as they leave office, say, we just took up residence in the White House for a few years. This is a house that belongs to the people. It was never ours. It belonged to the people. And they call it the greatest public housing in the world, right? Because you're just a tenant there for a little while, right? It belongs to the people. David says, the ark's not mine. Take the ark back. He also expresses something else here as he is fleeing. And that is great confidence in God, doesn't he? Because he says, you know, if I come back, the ark will be there. All right? Where it's supposed to be. Taking the ark with me is not going to help me. The ark needs to remain where it's supposed to be. If God spares my life, if I'm allowed to stay on the throne, I'll come back. But also, listen to this. David is saying, regardless of what happens, I want the ark to be in its proper place. Regardless of what happens, I want the ark to be in its proper place. And so David is saying, regardless of what happens to me, do all things approved by God. You remember the 3 Hebrew children when they were told to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's image, and they wouldn't do it. And then the king said, well, you know, if you won't bow down to the image, here's what's going to happen. And they said, well, our God is able to save us from your fiery furnace, right? He can save us from the fiery furnace if He chooses to do that. He may or He may not choose to do that. We don't know. We don't know. But know this, king, we're not going to bow down to your image. All right? We're not going to do that, regardless of what happens. David says, send back the ark of the covenant. And so Zadok and Abiathar did just that. Well, we continue in the chapter, and David learns the sad news that Ahithophel is among the conspirators. Have you ever had somebody to turn his back on you? Doesn't that hurt? Doesn't it hurt when you find that somebody's been doing something behind your back that you thought was a friend? That's David at this particular point. He thought Ahithophel was his friend. He thought Ahithophel was one who was going to stand by his side, but he's in on this too. And so David is a man of prayer all through this. Absalom's not praying, so you see the power of prayer. Very quickly, since we're getting close to the end of this chapter, there's another friend here of David's I want you to highlight, and he's found in verse 32, Hushai. Hushai, the Archite, it says. He came to meet with David. His coat was rent, and he had earth upon his head. What does that mean? I'm in a state of mourning over this. I don't know what to do. Well, here's what David says to Hushai. You're going to go back and you're going to be his spy. You're going to be my spy, David says. You're going to go back and you're going to be in the company of Absalom, and you're going to find out what's going on, and your counsel is going to win the day over whose? Ahithophel's. So, this particular plot is going to be turned back primarily because of the great work of one named Hushai, who will be there with Absalom and will give him counsel that will all do what? Work in David's favor. Okay? It'll work in David's favor. So we're up to chapter 16 in this very interesting saga as David is run out of the city. This is one where you already know it's going to turn out okay. Although when it does turn out okay for David, there's still going to be great sadness, isn't there? Sure will. Thank you.